Assistant Vice President in Analytics and Research at Genpact, Bangalore. He is having postdoctoral research experience at University of Portsmouth, UK, and has completed his PhD in pharmacy from Ahilya University, Indore. He is having 19 years of industrial experience in reputed companies like V Life Sciences Technologies Private Limited, Novalid Pharma, Jubilant Biosys Limited, and HCL Technologies. His research area is data analytics support to various life sciences and healthcare projects, development of new algorithms to expedite client drug discovery, research and development analytics, also the data science research, statistical modeling, predictive analysis, and text mining. His specialization is in data scientist with experience in varied business domain. He has successfully handled the research projects related to the designing and delivering NCEs for the therapeutic targets like kinase, ion channels, and peroxide, and architects design and implementation of GQSAR feature in VLife software product. He is having several high-impact international research publications to his credit. So we welcome a very versatile researcher and experienced data analytic, Dr. Subhash Ajmani, for this FDP to address our delegates on data science enabled pharmacometrics. Over to you, sir.
Subhash, sir, your mic is on mute.
Yeah, so I just wanted to welcome everyone to this session. And I would like to start with thanking the organizer, especially Manish sir, for connecting with me and giving me this opportunity to share my experiences in this platform. And I hope that the knowledge sharing session that has been carried out in the last 4 days were really helpful for the delegates who are attending this. And I hope that whatever I'm going to share today would also help them in some way in their projects or maybe their research work, whatever they are carrying out for that matter. So with that, I would like to start. Are you able to see my screen?
Yes, sir, visible, sir.
Okay, great. So essentially, I'll be talking about data science enabled pharmacometrics. And essentially, the talk is aligned in the way of these points, which gives the overview of the talk. First, I'll be talking about drug discovery and development. Then I will be introducing you to pharmacometrics. Then introduction to the data science. And probably I'll take a few slides to artificial intelligence and machine learning. And then with respective its enablement and pharmacometrics, followed up by some exemplary cases of AI/ML facilitating pharmacometrics. So I think all of you or all of us are aware of this particular picture that you see on the screen. That shows something about the information that even Anil was talking about yesterday. So it's like a funnel-shaped flow of the compounds that goes and then finally leads to one of the FDA-approved compound, and it's like a tedious. It's very tedious, expensive, risky. There are lots of things that are involved in pharma drug development cycle, as we all know. So that's the primary thing that everyone has in front of us to take up any task or activity, so that we can sort of circumvent these challenges, whatever we are trying to do in the drug development, and then try to take step so that we get it more, we achieve it more efficiently, and we get to the path what is needed to reach our goal. Now, when you see this, there is a little bit change that we see nowadays with the advent of real-world data analytics or real-world evidence. So what you see in the screen is typically the comparison of the traditional, what we saw in the earlier slide, the traditional drug development approach or drug development cycle, which typically is given on the top side of the picture, and the bottom side of the picture is essentially talking about the new or emerging way in which the drug development cycle paradigm is being shifted using the real world data analytics and the corresponding evidences to get to some goals. Now here, if we see, typically when we talk about the traditional drug development cycle, we are aiming to get some drug or some compound in the bottle, and then we just want to deliver it, and that's where we see that, okay, fine, we have got what we want, and then we see that, okay, now how does it fare with the real world consideration that are how much I have differentiated with already existing standard of care, or what are the other modalities that I have taken care while I did this particular work. That's how the traditional approach works. But the thing is, now we have got so many advancements in technology, and especially through cloud computing and data analytics and supercomputers, everything being handy, we are able to get much data in every step of starting from initial patients to how the patients are being treated, what happens later on, everything you get in different phases, every information is available. So we start using that information at each and every step. And that leads to a development of not a particular compound, but essentially you are trying to integrate the things in terms of a therapeutic strategy. And that's where now the things are moving. So this is just to give you an idea that things are moving from a compound to a therapeutic strategy, which encompasses may or may not be a compound, but it may also be something called as digital therapeutics. So if you want to know more about this, probably some of you might be aware of this, but if you want to know more about this, you can follow Wikipedia, and I've given some references below, so you can check this out. But this is, I don't want to digress, the current topic, but I just wanted to give you an idea about what is the shift that is happening. Please stop me or please ask me the questions if you want. Like, is it like in the can we be interactive? I'm just asking a question.
Yeah, sir. Yeah, no issues, sir. If the participants wants to ask anything, they can raise their hand.
Yeah, okay, all right. Thank you.
Yeah.
The thing is, finally, coming back to our point, what is our goal? What do we want to do? So here in the current context, when we are talking about as a medicinal chemist, as a pharmaceutical professionals, what we are trying to do is we are trying to do drug development, and we are all focused about the drug discovery and development that leads to something successful as a therapy. So the key motivation here is, as we all know, that high proportion of clinical trial fails in the late stage lead to the loss of huge investment and time. So the question comes is, can we do something about it? So can we simulate study outcome upfront to evaluate the probability of success? That's the thing that we are starting with. And yes, of course, with a plethora of information, even with the experiments and other things that we are carrying out, yes, we can do it. And this encompasses using pharmacokinetics, pharmacodynamics, interaction between them, the patient's traits, how the genotypic, phenotypic considerations of the patients are working out. What do we all know about disease? What do we all know about the placebo responses? All these things, when we see and we collectively study simultaneously, we typically will get some directional guidance that what would be our probability of success. I just wanted to highlight here, whatever you are looking the content over here, references from where you will find more details at the bottom of the slide. Now, what is pharmacometrics? I hope that many of you would be aware of that. It is not new, but essentially it is a science of developing and applying mathematical and statistical models to characterize, understand, predict a drug PK, PD, biomarker outcome behavior, using data visualization, statistics, stochastic simulations, and computer programming. That's the given definition for that. And as a pharmacist and as a graduates, we know our pharmacy profession. We know what is pharmacokinetics. And yesterday, Anil has given a very good idea about all these things. So I would not repeat that. So typically what you see is pharmacometric encompasses pharmacodynamics, pharmacokinetics, experimental design, pharmacogenetics, dose individualization, that is precise dose for a given patient, clinical design trials. These are the few of the areas which pharmacometric covers. And essentially, when we talk about, you have seen a lot of things, simulations, statistics. So it is not a number crunching what we are doing. It is a culture. We are using that thing in a very systematic manner to arrive to something, to get to a disciplined decision making, to move forward. It is, as you see earlier, you might have gotten an idea that it is not a, it's a multidisciplinary field which involves people from varied domain and background. And this includes pharmacologists, statisticians, engineers, data managers, and clinicians. But here, pharmacists can act as a translator because we have been trained in most of these areas throughout our curriculum. So we understand the language, different language. So we can be liaisoning between these people and communicate to all the team members. So that's where the pharmacist role comes. Now, this particular picture gives you an idea about what are the fields that are directly in touch with the pharmacometrics as a discipline, and what are the fields which a pharmacometric person who's working in that area would be interacting with on the outer side of the circle. So typically the fields that are involved within that domain is, as I mentioned, statistics, pharmacology, engineering, computational methods, medicine. And typically you would be interacting with people who are working on health economics, regulatory sciences, ethics, marketing, pharmaceutics, computer sciences. So that is how we see the arrangement of the overall pharmacometrics as a discipline. Typically, the purpose of pharmacometrics, few of them I've lined down over here, is decision making regarding drug approvals by regulatory agencies, information contained in the drug label such as dosing, improving the efficiency of clinical trials, and modifying individual patient care, standard of care. So what are the pharmacometrics analysis? So essentially, as we all know, that clinical pharmacology is what we are looking at, because we have to see what happens clinically when we actually test the compound, what happens to the patient. So we need to understand the dose concentration effect relationship that forms the fundamental for development or discovery for that matter. And the analysis that of the data that is being generated with the experiments to see any one of these fields would actually be encompassed in the field of pharmacometrics. It can start with pharmacokinetics, biomarker developments, clinical outcomes, disease characteristics or disease progression, trial characteristics. Essentially, we are talking about quantitative disease drug trial models, which we see over here in 3 different parts. And what we are trying to talk today, or mostly focus on, is PKPD and other things. So that in the perspective of this workshop. Now, what are the different elements of the process of pharmacometric analysis? So essentially, the different elements is you start with the data. You need to start with the data somewhere. You need to do the planning, what exactly is your goal. Then you start collecting the data, assembling it, do the experimental and data analysis. Then start putting up some models, some equations, going forward for the simulations, and then validating those and presenting it so that it actually completes the cycle, which is given over here. So those are the typical process elements for pharmacometrics. Now, why do we all care about what is to be done? Why molecular modeling, simulation, everything? Why it is needed? So if we don't care, but the thing is, the FDA cares about it, and FDA is really taking it very serious, stating that the commissioner of FDA Scott Gottlieb. He has mentioned that the use of in silico tools, and in a recent blog that he has mentioned that the use of in silico tools in clinical trials for improving drug development and making regulations more efficient. So FDA is currently using molecular modeling and simulation not to only see one aspect of it, but predict clinical outcome, inform clinical trial design, support evidence of effectiveness, optimizing dose. There are various aspects in which FDA is currently wanting us to work on these disciplines using the modeling and simulations typically, or applying the advanced technology. Because there's a need of an hour. We wanted to reduce our cost, we wanted to reduce our time, and moreover, on top of it, we wanted to provide the standard of care. That is the first priority. But being a commercial person, you always see about the time and the cost as well. Now, whether it actually works, so these are few like papers that talks about it. Yes, it is indeed getting industrialized and it saves cost. So it is not verbally or what we are talking about. There are evidences, recent publications that talks about the impact of it. So modeling and simulation, why do we need it? Well, we are all knowing and we are all dealing in some way while we are doing our work, the human body, the disease, and the therapy, or what you call the chemicals or drugs. So these are the three entities that we are working on. And there is a complex interaction that is happening over these three entities over the time. And we wanted to understand. To understand that, we are trying to make use of the models. So we typically, whatever comes, whatever rational thoughts we are trying to get to associate these things, entities in some way in relationship to each other, we try to put it in terms of some model. Once we are able to get that model and then we finalize it, we start sampling out the data. We start doing the simulations for the patients or subjects for that matter, virtual subjects, and try to increase our understanding. Once we are convinced about all this using the modeling and simulation, then we start typically asking questions. Now we have got a little bit understanding about what we are trying to do. There are questions coming in my mind. What should be the dose of it? If I double the dose, what happens? What would be the tenure of my study? You will have different kinds of questions that you may have in your mind when you work around a particular problem. And this essentially would help you to understand or to give answers to those questions that you have. So typically talk about that, okay, if your tenure is like this, probably it is really good. So that probability would ultimately lead you to somewhere that, okay, which direction should I go, should I don't go? So this is typically the purpose of why we are doing all this. Now again, you will ask me, why models? Why use models only? So the point is, these are very complex interactions, as we all appreciate and we know. It's not very straightforward and obvious that if I double the dose or if I increase my length of the formulation, like duration, it gives me, if I double the duration, it gives me double the impact. If I double the dose, it gives me, it's not a common sense thing. It doesn't translate like that. So essentially, we need models to integrate the information first, that what happens when I do some things. So essentially, a model gives us a handle to do that. And we can integrate the information across time, dose levels, studies, in vitro analysis that we do, in vivo, animals, man, different. So there are various aspects. So model actually help us to give some platform to integrate the information around this, the problem that we are doing or we are trying to solve. Now, once we do that, what do we want to do? We have understood what is there. So now the second step would be, can I predict what is going to be the things which I don't know, which I might not have conducted experimentally. So for that reason, models can be used and simulations are done to predict and extrapolate the scenarios which have not been done. Finding out, once you are able to predict it, can I get the suitable, best, optimal things that I can do? Also to identify gaps in what we know. I know that certain thing works in this way, but is it going to be in the same way? This modeling and simulation and exercises, the data analysis that you're doing would able to identify those gaps in your understanding and what actually it is. And moreover, you would be able to quantify the variability in terms of, as we know that we are leading towards pharmacogenomics, pharmacogenetics. We know that not an individual responds in a similar way. So what is the variability, typical variability in the patient to patient? Or what is the uncertainty? What do we know that it works, but it certainly can lead to some other things? Typically, all these things collective, we are trying to give answers to the questions and finally supporting the decisions to the way forward. Now, what type of questions are we talking about? Well, dose, the first thing, the first into human or man. Can we talk about? Yes, you can. Once you have the understanding of PKPD assessments, you can very well study that, simulate it. You can try to get an idea about what could be typical starting points. How do you translate it from first phase to second phase to third phase likewise? How do we deal with the dosage in different patients? Or how do we do the dose adjustment? What would be my study design? What should be my inclusion criteria? What should be my exclusion criteria? What is the frequency? All these questions, you would be able to, given that scenario, you would be able to find out the answers for that. Performance at the moment. And finally, all these things again would lead you to go no-go decision. And typically, this is what you're doing. You are establishing some models relating the drugs to the diseases using different components. You are trying to do the making use of the simulations at different point in time. And then you are trying to get hold of what exactly you want and to support your decisions. Now, what are models? Models are representation of a system. And that is essentially the thing is any system model can be for as a very simple thing that what is the flow of a liquid from a bucket. Size, shape, other things. It could be as simple as that. So models are representation of a system designed to provide knowledge or understanding the system. And models are usually simplified representation of systems. If you do it more in a complex way, some things you may probably, not everything that is complex will lead to something which is useful, but simple things on the other way may lead to some good decision support systems. And that makes them, the simplified way of modeling makes them simply useful. When I say simple, I'm talking about relatively simple. Now, what type of PMX models we are talking about? The PMX is standing for pharmacometrics. So we are talking about PK models, we are talking about PD models, PK-PD models. Essentially, we are talking about something of this sort, which gives the feedback to each other and then collectively work together a base. There are further advancements, and then we are working on disease progression models. There are recent developments in that. There is a recent report on the Alzheimer's disease progressive disease model using the biomarkers. And finally, and this particular disease progression models are very helpful in cancer patients, wherein we take the samples of the patient at different times we do the population sampling, and then we work on the different stages, whether it's the early stage or later stage or the last stage. So depending on the samples and the corresponding results, whatever is there, we would be able to judge what stage and what sort of risk the patient is carrying, then what sort of treatment should be given to the patient, and how do we finally control the disease. So essentially, it's been used a lot in the case of cancer, but there are other diseases in which slowly the things are picking up. And there are a lot of models and a lot of things that we are making. And then finally, what we want to do is we wanted to make use of whatever all is available to do some meta-analysis on the models, like analysis of the analysis, to finally to come up with, can we do something holistically on those things to further take some guidance in terms of increasing comparing the efficiencies or safety or other measures, or taking it to more specific individuals for that matter. So that's how typically we work. Now, I've been talking about decision making and other things. So what typically is needed? What is the success for that? So there are these points which we should always have in mind, which are the base for the modeling and simulation, and would lead you to the right strategy to make the right strategy in taking a decision for the drug development. So you need to understand your patient well. What disease, what comorbidities are there, what are the symptoms are there. Typically, you need to understand based on the disease what is there, what biomarkers are really there, established, or you need to make some revisions, the limitations of it. You need to understand the pathophysiology, the caveats behind that, what we know, what we don't know. Are we aware about the right target that we are working on? And finally, to shape it up, we wanted to make use of the dose responses or PK/PD curves to give the feedback to the patient in terms of the therapy. So using all these things in an appropriate manner, in a judicious manner, and very well being informed of what we are using, we can make use of modeling and simulation or any data analytics practice for that matter to be successful, or to be leading us in the right way, I would say, for doing our job. So how do we develop and apply pharmacometric models? We need to understand clinical pharmacology of the drug. We need to understand the structure of the data that we are dealing with. We need to choose adequate analysis method. Once you have done with the method and the analysis, you need to evaluate the performance of a model, and then probably go for application of the pharmacometric model or of the model that you have developed for the quantitative or predictive purposes. This is a typical way in which you develop and apply pharmacometric models. Now, there are different approaches for pharmacometric models, especially the top-down or the bottom-up approach. In the top-down approach, we start with the patient's population. In the bottom-up approach, we are typically using the knowledge about the physiology or the different organ systems that we have. And then we build up the models to carry out something which gives us an idea about what would be the final pharmacokinetic profiles, how will it look at, how will it, and then correspondingly we start looking at the different applicative aspects of it. There are current reports wherein we are not using only top-down or bottom-up. There is a middle-out approach also, which combines these two to make use of both of the methods. One is coming from understanding more from the physiology in terms of the anatomy of the body, the different compartment systems. What is our understanding? And second one is coming from more from the observations of the patient. So we wanted to include both of them. So that is going into the middle-out approach. Now, top-down approach typically talks about, so any of the data that you would have, typically for the pharmacokinetics, as you all be knowing, would be two-dimensional data or two columns data typically, wherein one of the column would be the time and second one would be the concentration. So all the things that you're doing it for, all the analysis for the pharmacokinetic purpose is based on those observations. And that observations that you have for a given subject, actually you do the replications of that, or you need to go to different patients to see what are the different curves that you get in different patient curve. Whether the compound that you're studying has the same profile or has the same two columns. What is the difference between the two columns that you have for one subject to the others? So that forms the basis for doing all the modeling work. So this particular graph, what you see here, is typically showing those two columns plotted in the x and y axis. The x-axis being the time, the y-axis being the concentration. And what you see is typical curve for the oral administration, wherein there is a certain time that needs for the absorption of the drug, the absorption phase, and then the elimination phase. Typically, what we are trying to do is there are various approaches, as you know. There are naive pooling method, naive average method. You've got standard two-stage method, iterative two-stage method. You've got non-linear mixed effect modeling, which I have labeled over here. So non-linear mixed effect modeling is typically preferred over the other methods. So typically why we are doing that is we wanted to fit one model to the data that we have derived from all. Now that you may say that you can do by naive pooling as well. But there are more chances that you will overestimate the variances over there, because when you are doing the naive pooling, you are considering everything as one, whatever data you have collected. So you end up overestimating the variance of your data distribution. Although you may get some sense of how does it work, but to get more understanding, we wanted to have a model which actually captures the notion how does it work, and then also give us an idea about what is the typical variation between the individuals. So when we are talking about this method, it has got three components. First component is structural model, which helps you to define the function. What function, what model, or what equation goes in your model. Then the statistical element coming into it, which talks about how do we consider it to get more precise understanding about what are the inter-individual variations, what are the inter-equation variables. When you do the same thing twice, thrice at the same point in time, what are the differences that you are observing? And finally, when we predict something for a given individual, what is the residual, what is the gap that we are having with the actual and the predicted? And the third component, which is very important, as we all know, the covariate model. So it is not the patient on its own, but there are things which the patient is associated with, the patient characteristics or patient traits, the demographics, age, sex. Those things also have the important criteria or important impact to vary that response that you see in terms of a given profile. So these are the typical three components that we consider while we are doing this top-down approach and NLME modeling. Now, a little bit more details on that. So structural or mathematical model, as you see, and I think yesterday Anil gave an idea about that. Thanks to Anil to cover most of the points there in terms of pharmacokinetics yesterday. So, so here you see a typical model. I will not go into details of this now again, but this is a typical model, one compartment IV bolus model. And then you actually feed in the respective dose and volume distribution, clearance data in that, and then you try to find out what would be the concentration at a given point in time. Now, statistical modeling comes into picture. We wanted to reduce typically the delta. Well, there is a predicted value, there is an actual value. So there is a delta value that is coming in. So the statistical modeling typically helps us to minimize that and find out what could be the optimal values of your parameters that you are trying to find out.
Subhash sir,
Yeah.
I think some participant have raised hand, probably want to ask something. So can I permit?
Sure, please.
Yeah, Dr. Archana.
Hello, Subhash sir. Good morning.
Yeah, good morning.
Sir, in the previous slide, the data which you are discussing, is it the data which is generated from the clinical trial or it is some population data?
This is a given population data.
So from where such population data is available?
So you can go to the clinicaltrials.gov is the site where you will get the data, or there are some model repositories also. Drug disease DD more.
Okay.
You
But
will get the
it is
models and the
giving,
corresponding details.
it is giving individual patient data.
They may give it as a supplementary information, or they may direct you to the databases if it is in the public domain.
Okay. Okay. Thank you very much, sir. Thank you.
Any other question, please?
Any other participant wants to raise any question? No, sir.
All right. So we are all good till now. Okay. All right. So so we are trying to understand, and ultimately when we at a larger goal is to use this data for the PKPD modeling and test the range of models and ultimately define what fits the best where we are going. And whatever you are doing, ultimately the NNME model is going to give you typical model parameter values, the variances in the individual variability, the variances of the residual errors, and these are typically estimated by maximum likelihood method. There are various other methods that are available, but most likely or most available is the maximum likelihood. Once you're done with the model, then you're getting into simulations. You've finalized it, your model. You know what you are dealing with. What is the system that you are having in the study? Now you start looking at the different blocks that can vary the performance of that model. So essentially, when you are varying the blocks or you're doing something changes over there, it mimics those changes will get reflected in terms of model outputs. And that would lead you to simulate the data, and would give you the handle to study different impact of different scenarios when you're comparing the different treatments or doses or observations. There would be different things that you would be trying to do for when you're doing simulation. So depending on what you're trying to do, you will get the certain comparisons, and you will get to see its result, and that will ultimately lead you somewhere more closer to where you want to achieve. What do you want to achieve, and where do you want to be? So that's how the typical overall data to model simulation works. There's another approach, which is bottom approach, which is laid down over here. It starts with model building. For model building, there are two essential parameters. As I told you, model structure definition, the organ tissue, the equations. Equation will typically be in terms of your the equilibriums or the flow of the blood. What is the extraction in a particular organ? So we will have those small models relative like small models put in a particular model form, so that we get the final estimates. And then we are using some parameter values related to drugs that are needed. We get for the model building, and then model evaluation, and then whatever is needed for our processes, we will do the model customization. So typically, we have this as a starting point, and we end up something doing the validation or evaluation of our model performance. This is just to give you an overview of human PK prediction. This is coming up from a recent article from AstraZeneca, that over the time how they build up their platform for doing the PK predictions and utilizing the knowledge base that they have developed. So this typically talks about the overall prediction workflow, and then finally they are trying to make use of it to get the right patient, right target, right tissue, right safety, and right commercial. But that's where the whole thing is lined over here. Now coming to the PK/PD modeling, there are two aspects as we know. One is the PK, another one is the dynamics, pharmacodynamics. So these are the things which impacts the drug exposure, the corresponding thing, the responses that we see, and this typically depicts what all the things are varying there, and these all things goes into modeling and simulation of PK/PD. And typically we are talking about establishing a relationship between the concentration effect or the time or the effect. Now there are different challenges that we face. Again, this is another way of depiction that you start with a dose, you have a kinetics, it reaches to the tissue, the concentration in a particular cell, or and then it shows some response, which is early response or indications. Then it shows the final, the late responses in terms of what drug does to the body, and then you get to see some observable effect. But the thing here is there are challenges that there are different time scales for these studies, what we do. So typically ranging from hours to minutes to hours to weeks to months and to years. So when we talk about drug dose exposure for a given compound, it may varies in the hours, the time may varies in hours. When we start to look at the responses of it, it may be varying in minutes to the early responses. Like for example, if I give a drug for diabetes, the glucose lowering, glucose level, it will take some minutes to hours. But when it comes to the actual, when you want to know more about the therapy, how does it impact, you don't only worry about the glucose level, you get more into the HbA1c. So it doesn't reflect in 1 day or 2 days, it takes weeks to months. So typically those are the things that gets into a slow biomarker. Or biomarker, as we all know, they are something which is used to measure the progression of the disease or the impact of the drug. So there are different kinds of biomarkers. So here, and then the final outcome, as you know, and we keep on doing the post-marketing surveillance. So we get to see the most final outcome, which may take years to get reflected, maybe in terms of the toxicity or the adverse events or something of that sort, like undesirable effects. So that may take years. So those are the challenges. Now, how do we deal with those? So the modeling and simulations, and typically now the AI and ML things, the technology, we are making use of it to give the answers to that. And it's simple that you go in to do the reverse engineering. You start with the outcome, you try to see that can I link this outcome to the biomarkers, the fast biomarker and the slow biomarker, because we already have the historical data. So we try to understand the backwards and then try to get to see the things at the final level. So that the overall thing, we see that retrospectively and try to get to see that, okay, now what is the relationship when I go backwards, and can I learn from that for moving forward? So that's how typically we end up using all these data analytics work and give the guidelines to make the process efficient. Now, as I've been telling, this is just to show that we will be using modeling and simulation nowadays in drug development throughout the different phases at a different level. So this slide, typically you must be aware of that, and you can just have a reiteration or refresh yourself. Now, when we talk about all this work that we are doing, so it is helping us in drug development, regulatory reviews, and post like approval for that. So essentially, it is likely to impact the patients for getting better drugs for more patients. Essentially, the pharmacometrics is, or this data analytics, I will say overall, is helping us to get to better drugs for more patients. Greater trial and market predictability for the sponsors who are paying for it. Improved healthcare, because if we are able to develop more better drugs, the healthcare quality will be improved, and the payer has to pay reduced cost to the patients, especially in the foreign countries. The payer is liable to pay for whatever diseases or whatever therapy treatment the patient undergoes. And then finally, all these things done in a systematic manner, you will have more effective regulatory review of the information. These are the selected case studies that highlights the importance of pharmacometrics, and this typically talks about the value of exposure response modeling and simulations in trial design, drug approval, label, as you see. So it's not a new thing, but it's coming up slowly. Now people are realizing the importance of it. And these are few established case studies in different areas, and which indicates that how does it impact in terms of time, cost saving, and improved drug profile. Now this is just to inform that there are various types of regulatory decisions that are influenced by these analysis. I would just let you go through it for a few seconds. Typically, how do we do it? So these are a few examples of the open source public license softwares. And why do we want to make use of open source and pharmacometric of these tools? Is typically it gives you a shared learning and innovation. There are typical features that it gives you community based. This is typically important. Community based collaboration. So wherein when we I don't work per se in pharmacometrics right nowadays, but when it comes to the area, so when we see, say for example, R, I'm using R for various other projects that I'm dealing with. So the thing is, when I work in R, I have a good community collaboration. I know that what other people are doing, and if I've got some problem, if I don't, so I can communicate with the other people who are working in the same platform, and it is developed in the public platform, and it's an open source. So that typically helps you when you are dealing with more project-oriented programmings and more project-oriented software usage. So that's where you will find it very useful. And you will also feel satisfied if you develop something on your own and you can contribute to the community, because it's open source. You can give your contribution to the scientific community for that matter, or technical community. So that's where, although there are established commercial softwares available, but still these are something which is open source, and they are having public license. All right, so we have covered the pharmacometrics. Any questions so far? I'll get into data science in that case.
Participants. Okay, continue.
Yeah, all right. So we have been talking about data all the time. What is data?
Excuse me, 21 slide, please.
Sorry? 21. You said something?
Hello, Kiran sir. Mani Kiran sir.
Yeah.
Am I missing
21
something?
sir.
It's me. Sir, could you please just show me that slide number 21, because where you have mentioned those different models before that. 21. No, before that, I think 20. You have mentioned 4 models, 4 to 5 models.
These are components which goes in your nonlinear mixed effect modeling.
Okay.
So there are 3 components. One is the structural component. Second one is the statistical component. The third one is the covariate component.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Yeah, sure. So again, I summarized over here. So structural, statistical, and covariate. All right. So data can be any quantity, any number, information, facts, graphs, observation, measurement, anything can be data. And it is collected for a purpose. It can be for scientific research in your case. It may be for finance. It may be for business, other business considerations, business management, making business strategies, business intelligence, anything for that matter. So data can be of various types. What is science? We are all knowing that the science is knowledge. Knowledge attained through some practice of the study that we do. A system for acquiring knowledge. So essentially, we are all learning. We are attaining something by doing something, by doing some studies and practices, and that's what we call the science, the knowledge, which is attained through knowledge. So typically, in this perspective, what do we say it as? What is data science? So essentially, again, the data science is an interdisciplinary field that uses scientific methods, processes, algorithms, and systems to extract knowledge and insights from many structural and unstructured data. That is the Wikipedia definition. But the thing is, it doesn't speak what does it mean. So essentially, we talk about it a little bit in details. So what is that structured data? What is unstructured data? So structured data is typically what is having a typical structure, your Excel sheets, your databases, typically wherein you know what columns are there, what information is there in an arranged manner. The unstructured data is what you find in the real world in terms of images, audios, videos, anything, text, for that matter. Those are all unstructured things. You need to do work to convert that unstructured thing to the structured thing, and then finally it gets into as a data for usage. Once you get the data, you get to apply something on that. You do analytics over that. You apply different principles over there. For what? To extract the knowledge. Okay, I've got the knowledge. What do I do with that? So I need to use the knowledge. Knowledge will be used to find out the meaningful and actionable insights. That's where it completes the overall process. So that is what the data science is. There are different data science techniques that we use typically, ranging from the text contextual analysis, data mining, probability statistics, machine learning, predictive analytics. There's so many, so on and so forth. These are just few lined out over here. Various components, various techniques of data sciences. We are talking about a specific case over here, wherein it comes in the healthcare and specifically in drug discovery and development. But there are various other, just to name few other domains wherein it is applied, and there are many other areas, starting from banking to transport to manufacturing to e-commerce to finance. There are several areas where the data science has got its impact and it shows the value. And where we stand over here is we are standing over here in the healthcare, and that too a slice of it, which is drug discovery and development for that matter. So it's the impact of the data science is huge. Now, how do we do it? Can we talk about it in terms of the process? Yes, we do. So typically what we have is, this is the typical process of data science. You need to ask a question. Data on its own, if I give you lots and lots of data, it doesn't speak on its own. You need to ask the question, and that question should be in the right way. The language of that should be the right way, so that the data can answer that particular question. So you need to know what data you're dealing with and what kind of question you're asking to the data. And what would you do to the data overall, finally? Excuse me.
Yeah, no problem, sir.
Just a moment, please.
Yeah, no issue, sir.
Sorry about that. Yeah, so what I'm saying is essentially there's a process, there's a specific process for data sciences. So typically data on its own doesn't speak. You need to ask the question, and that question should be aligned to your goal. Now, before asking the question, you should also need to check what data you have. So depending on that, you need to ask the question, and then you need to somebody's calling me again and again.
Okay, sir. No problem, sir. No problem.
Yeah. So depending on that, so you need to ask the question, and then you need to see the data. If whatever data you have, you don't need you don't have the data which would help you to get get you to the goal, or get you to the predictions or estimates that you want to do. You probably need to do something to get the data. And once you get the data, you need to again see that what are, like, is it the public domain data? Is it the privacy issues are there? Have you sampled it properly again? So those are all the things that goes in your data collection part or get the data side. Then you do whatever you have collected for that matter. You explore the data to understand what have you collected at the first go, what all the length, breadth, height, whatever is there of the data, what is there, what you have collected, you explore it. Once you're satisfied with that exploration of data, that okay, indeed I think that particular data is sufficient for me to get the answers for the questions that I'm asking, I get into modeling phase. And then once you have made the model, you try out fitting out the different methods to build the model. You fit the different models, get to see the fitness of the models, do the validation of the models, and then you finally shortlist a model, get to see what things you wanted to get out of the model, what learnings you have done, what sense does it make to your business scenario or your research problem, or for any other problem that you're dealing with. Try to make use of it at the last stage. Although you might have done, so here the important point is, the first point is very important, to ask the right questions, and the last point is very important. You might have done a fantastic job over here in all the other things, but if you're not able to communicate and visualize the result, or make an impact, or tell the story of the learning properly, your work is not appreciated well. So you need to make use of a lot of visualizations and to understand the overall theme of starting from the problem to the answer that you're getting. So you need to make a storyline there. You need to tell it properly. And why I'm saying so is, this may be very well important in the corporate or maybe in the business scenario wherein you are dealing with the clients. So client doesn't understand the language that we talk in day out in terms of our colleagues, or in terms of our department heads, or our surroundings. Client has a certain business language in which they will understand that. Even in research, R&D head may not be knowing all the details that goes on the bench. So you need to tell it in that way so that the results can get communicated properly to the respective person. Even after doing that, if you are not able to get the things probably, or maybe you're needing something else, you probably need to ask another question which is aligned to that, and you circle back. And you circle back, and then you again do the problem. That's how the process goes. Now, what is artificial intelligence and machine learning, and specifically with respect to pharmacometrics? So I will start with model-informed drug discovery development. So essentially, MID3 is recommended to be applied through the preclinical to the clinical drug development phases, and especially to optimize and inform decision making with respect to clinical trial design, the selection of drugs and doses to be carried forward for preclinical phase. Those are critical aspects, and that's the reason why this process that you see, which is known as MID3 approach, is being used actively these days in the industry scenario. So it starts from the ADME, in vitro, in vivo analysis, drug-drug interactions, your phase 1, phase 2 studies, everything. So you start working from preclinical phase, and even before that, in discovery phase, you may apply this thing. So preclinical phase to clinical phase, there is a cycle. They call it as a cycle, learning, confirming cycle. So you learn from the data that you generate. You develop the models. You get By developing models, you accumulate the knowledge. That knowledge, in terms of when you do the simulations, you get to see certain scenarios which will give you some inferences. That inferences would lead you to make to do some right decision making, and then it goes further back again. If there is some changes there, you get and feedback into the data loop again. So there is a learning confirming cycle that goes on and on. And this typically includes, as we see above, PK to quantitative system pharmacology, machine learning, artificial intelligence. And finally, the available knowledge is used for the efficient drug discovery and development. Now, what is artificial intelligence? So any technique, anything which enables computers to mimic human brain is typically artificial intelligence. And there are various aspects of various things aligned to artificial intelligence. And what we are talking about is specifically this particular subset, what talks about machine learning. So there are other components to it, which starts from when you're having the text data, the natural language processing goes in. When you have got the audio data, you get to see a lot of speech recognition, which is nowadays being used mostly in your conversational AI bots, chat bots, the other things that you see, there it goes. Then your vision, computer vision, which ultimately makes use of image, and that also is being heavily practiced in the medical scenario, healthcare systems these days. So computer vision is a very good application, and it is being mostly used in the diagnostics to help the diagnostics, medical diagnostics. You've got the robots. Again, robots you must be aware of. It's being used very, I think, very nicely even in the labs. And then we know that robots are doing a lot of other jobs at the macro level, but it does the jobs at the macro level also very precisely. So there are various aspects of artificial intelligence. And what we are talking about is typically over AI ML when we talk about artificial intelligence. Machine learning, it's a subset of it. And ML is, what is ML? So ML is a data analysis method that automates analytical model building. There are various algorithms to do that, and it iteratively learns from the data. So it needs data. You need to feed in the data in the machine so that it learns and it gives you the answers to your problems. Excuse me, I'll just take this call again and again. It's coming. I'm sorry about this.
Okay, sir.
Yeah. So, so the thing is, it works with the data and the computer. So ultimately, when it learns, it identifies. It gives you to identify hidden patterns within the data. And there are various algorithms that you use for the machine learning. So it starts from supervised learning, unsupervised learning, semi-supervised learning, reinforcement learning, evolutionary learning, deep learning. There are various ways or types of machine learning. And typically in our scenario, what we are talking about is supervised learning and unsupervised learning. So unsupervised learning is typically just to show an example. So I have given you some objects over here without giving any details. Can you give me some groupings of that? So you would typically land up with this. You see some birds, you see a reptile, probably a crocodile, something, and you see an animal. So you say that typically it's a 3 when I see certain aspects of it. But this is not the solution. This is one of the solutions which we think could be most appropriate. And I have not given you any information on that. Then comes your supervised learning, wherein you know that what you are working with. Okay. So you label. So if I give you some more information on the same data, you would be able to better train or better say that, okay, I wanted to typically work around, can I predict duck as duck? And then I make use of that particular label to do the supervised learning. to get a model which, when I get another object, I would be able to say that, okay, this is a duck or this is not a duck. So that goes into supervised learning mode. There are various algorithms available for supervised and unsupervised machine learning. I'm not talking about deep learning over here because it goes into another more depth of it. But typically, unsupervised and supervised machine learning methods solves most of the purpose. Now, what in terms of when we see the machine learning or modeling and simulation that we do, so pharmacometrics personnel, who is known as typically pharmacometrician, he develops a mechanistic or semi-mechanistic knowledge based on what he knows. Typically, you have certain things in mind that this is what it is. Dose, what would be the exposure to drug, depending on its acidity or basic nature or the nature of the drug. You can typically guess something. You can try to extrapolate that based on your knowledge or your things. So it's basically identifying a deductive model. You make a model and then you run through that particular model to see that what results you're getting. And then you finally make use of the observational data to see that how does it fit well. So you typically start in terms of some models and then you try to verify it using certain data points. So you start typical in terms of pharmacometrics. It's like you're doing some response measurement as a function of time or as a function of individual variability, covariances, or the parameter differences. So that's how you're trying to get to the models. And that particular model, whatever you think is relevant for a given situation, based on your knowledge, you build that particular model and then you get to the verification of it, simulation of the results, and then you make use of it. But in terms of machine learning, what helps is basically machine learning scientist or data scientist. It's basically doing the other way. It starts with data. You get a lot of data there to train. You do some hypothesis that a problem is there in hand. You try out different methods, and then you learn to a particular model. So this typically model in terms of a supervision model or classification model in this particular case, you are trying to see that can I make something which separates the red points from the blue point. So I start with data, and then I try to make a model. And then I make use of that particular model to get some inferences. Typically, it may or may not be the cause and effect relationship, or rather most of the time, but it will certainly lead you to somewhere which gives you more of a predictive aspects. Now, there is a potential for synergy between machine learning or mechanistic and semi-mechanistic model, which is depicted over here. So input of the one is actually getting as an output for the other. So this is how it actually works in synchronization. So where all the AI ML is involved in the pharmacometrics, which are typically in prediction of DMPK parameters, cluster various patient groups, ensemble modeling, prediction of model parameters for new inputs, selection of covariates, and sensitivity analysis. These are typical aspects wherein typical machine learning or AI can help us. So I'll just give you some examples or something which is like more pertaining to these things that I'm talking about. So DMPK parameters. So this is a very recent paper. I think it's June or July, which says that there is a direct comparison of total clearance prediction between a computational machine learning model versus bottom-up approach.
One of the participant has raised hand.
Yeah. Please.
Can we permit to ask the question?
Yes, please. Yes, please.
Yeah. Dr. Amar? Yeah. Dr. Amardeep? So you can ask whatever you want to.
Sir, can you explain regarding the unsupervised model?
Over here?
No, previous
Unsupervised
slide.
model.
Yes.
Yeah. So essentially, so for doing the unsupervised learning, what you have is you have got a set of objects. In our case, if I have to say, you have got a set of molecules. Okay. Now that molecule you cannot directly compare. You need to translate those molecules into some mathematical form, or you need to encode them. So encoding is done using the your variable formation or descriptors, molecular descriptors. When you transform your set of molecules to the descriptors or variables, that gives you the handle to data that you've generated for the molecules for doing any unsupervised learning. And it can be as simple as a cluster analysis. So for example, you have got two property, you've got log P and your molecular weight. So how can you bunch, or can you see that are there any cluster of molecules in your bunch of molecules which can be grouped together basis your log P and molecular weight? So you can actually generate the groups or clusters. And this can be simply done by taking the measure. So now when I say that, which will measure how similar are those two molecules. So to measure the symmetry or similarity or dissimilarity between two molecules, you need to have a measure. And that measure, you need to characterize the molecule. And in this particular case, we are characterizing the molecule, which is one is your log of partition coefficient, another one is your molecular weight. And that particular two dimension, how do we want to use to match those things or to see the similarity or dissimilarity? You can simply use Euclidean distance. The distance between two molecules with reference to those two dimensions. The more similar they are, they will be more close to the distribution in two-dimensional graph. And using Euclidean distance, and then you actually measure the distance between all the molecules, you get to see the distance matrix. And using the distance matrix, you can further apply. There are two kinds of the clustering method. One is the hierarchical clustering method. Another one is non-hierarchical clustering method, which is k-means, which is widely popular used in any analytic scenario, which gives you a handle of what could be the probable groupings in that, and which is also I have given. So if you see here, the clustering is what I'm referring to. So in this way, in this way, for this particular problem, what I'm looking at is I am taking one dimension and looking at, say for example, I'm taking a dimension bird. I'm taking in this particular case, I'm taking bird, a small animal and a larger animal. So those are that is one dimension that I'm taking, and on basis on that, I'm actually clubbing these three birds and the small animal and the big animal. So I'm just describing the nature of the animal, whether it's a bird, large animal or a small animal. So that one dimension I'm using, and I'm trying to see whether all the animals, how they are being similar to each other. So it says that first, second and fifth are bird because they are more close to each other, or they are birds only. So like that, if I'm able to get through. I hope I am able to get through.
Yes, sir.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. Thanks a lot.
Okay, and there are various other intricacies that are involved in individual methods that you see that once you understand the basics, you can further deal with the intricacies that are involved in the parameters that you need to adjust within the given methodology. So like in this particular case, I have talked about in terms of what are the dimensions, what are the variables, what is the distance measure, what is the methodology that you are going to use for doing the clustering. So all those things, once you understand this basic flow, you would be able to get into that and you would be able to make use of it to your problem. I think I was. Yeah. So this is typically in terms of your comparison of total clearance prediction. So this is a recent article. This just shows that how machine learning is able to give us some sense of how good or the machine is able to help us through the drug discovery phase. Because this is a direct comparison. When you see that the point distribution, so just to read that observed and predicted, you see more closer points. It should be ideally on the straight line over here, but they are more closer here as compared to the other graph, which is coming from the in vitro in vivo evaluation. So I'm not going into details of how did they do it and what were the reasons, but I'm just trying to give you some idea about what typical aspects that we study and how it is helpful. So in this particular case, you are using unsupervised learning for pharmacokinetic responses, as we know that there are there is a high individual variabilities, and we may see some groupings when we generate the PK profiles. So unsupervised learning helps us find out those groups, like how many different clusters of patients we are dealing with or we have dealt with when we did some experiments. And here the method, the performance of the method or how accurately it predicts it really matters a lot. Because manually when you see, you may get confused, unless being said that these are different things when you get into more data aspects and you get more into dimensionalities of that. And this typically would help you in order to personalize the therapy for new patients. Once you understand what typical groupings are there, then for the new patient, you would be able to see what particular class or what particular profile it follows or the patient follows. Then this typically talks about the ensemble approach, wherein the ensemble approach using the NLME, that is non-linear mixed effect modeling, and the artificial neural networks. So it's being used. It gives us a very low prediction error compared to other modeling, other methodologies. So that's where the ensemble comes into picture. So artificial neural network goes into category of the starting phase of your deep, like ending phase of your supervised learning. It's more complex methodology, and then it gives you the handle to get into deep learning. Then genetic algorithm is used for global strategy for PKPD modeling because there are a lot many variables and other things. So it gives you a lot of search like dimension to get to your solution. So genetic algorithms, which is based on the evolutionary principle, is being used to help us in modeling. And essentially, where it helps us is to take out from the local minima and put us to the global minima, most probably, because it is a stochastic method, and that's where it helps us. And then also it has got the capability to work efficiently in a larger dimension space. So that's where the genetic algorithm in this particular case is helping us out to select the covariants, and also the other variable that goes in the model. ML also help us to do the sensitivity analysis. So sensitivity analysis is nothing but you wanted to understand typically what variables or what parameter, how sensitive your outcomes are to a given parameter. So modeling and simulation, if you do a lot of that exercise based on the known data and other things, it may take you time. It's a computationally intensive procedure to simulate things. Therein, machine learning actually helps you because it's like you give certain amount of data and the machine gets trained, and then it actually gives you the predictions, or it helps you in the sensitivity analysis. It also helps you to generate the predictive model building, which ultimately leads you to the real-time clinical decision support. So essentially, as you can see, modeling and simulation parameters are being assessed by the knowledge that you have gained through the mathematical model and using your data and the prior knowledge that you have. Those outputs for the corresponding patients are being used with the input of the patients, which we routinely do as an analytical process like omics or imaging for a different diagnostics and others. So that machine uses, and then it gets trained, so that next time for the new patient, if somebody comes, can we now make a prediction for the curves or the time response curve, or how does it vary? So it is helpful there. Then you club both mixed effect models and machine learning into the model itself, the component. So you get into the equation itself, the model itself, say that my one component would be coming from machine learning, another component will be coming from the from your mixed effect modeling, and then you merge them, and then you get to see the result of that. So this is again a recent paper which is published last year, and this is an article which talks about it in terms of its uses in analyzing the logic utility data. This is a holistic, again, one of the recent paper published in June this year, which talks about the generalized pharmacometric modeling, wherein people have showed that how big data, like when you have lots of data, then you have got machine learning, you have got the standard approach, how when we actually make the combination of this can lead us the handle to deal with the diverse set of populations. And it essentially it's been explored, so probably it's worth have a look at it and then try to see where all it fits in and how we can leverage on this particular modeling strategy. Coming to the application in terms of the actual, in terms of supporting the various aspects of drug development, application of AI to optimize drug dosing. This shows that using the few patients of data, how can you do the precision dosing to those based on the patient characteristics. And typically when you use the sort of unsupervised and unsupervised machine learning along with some supervisions, like maybe along with some decision making, you get to see that whenever the AI is giving you the particular dose recommendation, there you see better results or better outcomes on the patients, as shown in the right figure. You can use machine learning in development of predictive biomarkers, which is essentially forming the basis for doing any PD or any disease progression modeling.
Yeah. Sorry to disturb you again, Subhash sir.
Yeah.
One more participant wants to ask
Yeah,
something.
sure.
Can I
Sure.
allow? Yeah.
Sure, please.
Yeah, Dr. Archana, you can ask your question.
Sir, on slide number 50, you mentioned different models are there which are used and then it will give some results. So
Okay.
these models are pre-designed models and we have to fit our data into that.
So models can be pre-designed if it actually, so you need to see there are established models. If it works in your case, you can very well make use of it. But if it is not making if it is not working in your case, then probably there is a scope for you to either tweak or refine the model that is existing depending on what you see as a result, or there is a typical scope for creation of a new model, because it may be the case which is like way different than what has been already known. So you need to work from the base or ab initio to generate that particular model for your case.
Okay. Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Does it answer your question?
Yes, sir. Thank you very
Okay.
much.
Thank you. Once you have the understanding of the biomarker, then typically this is another case study wherein machine learning is used and been demonstrated to be useful in the time to event analysis, which is typically a survival analysis, wherein you see the trajectories or the survival profiles for the different patients. And what you see is the neural networks works better over the normal Cox-Box model. And finally, this is an effort just for the sake of knowledge. ATOM, that is Accelerating Therapeutics for Opportunity in Medicine Consortium. This is I just found recently being published, and the industries are working together to make a consortium and work towards collaborative efforts to use collaborative usage of data science, drug discovery, and translational modeling to come up with a platform which leads to efficient drug discovery and development platform. So just to bring to your notice. Now, if I don't say limitations and challenges, it would not be fair, because whatever you do has limitations and challenges, whether it be experiments, whether it be theoretical in the lab, whatever you do has some limitations and you may face some challenges. So I start with the challenges in the data science. So these are typical limitations and challenges. Data acquisition. Sometimes data is like really you struggle to get the data. Although we say that we are dealing with the big data era, or we are in the big data era, but the thing is, the questions that you're asking about, you may not have data for that, and you need to do a lot of things to get to the data and for the data acquisition. Even you get the data, you need to make use of it in a very judicious manner, that you need to see that what all is available, and then you need to separate it out. Like you need to sort of do a little dirty job when it comes to cleansing the data. Sometimes when your data you're not sure about, it's arbitrary data or real data, you may end up getting the unexpected results. There is a susceptibility to the error, because there is a learning procedure going out in that. So unless it has been regularized, validated, and like that makes sure that you don't end up in the higher error, but still there is a susceptibility, because that depends on the understanding you have about the data. Then large amount of domain knowledge is required for dealing with any data. Unless you know the domain, you can't ask relevant questions, and you cannot formulate the learnings, and you cannot make the inferences, proper inferences coming out of the models. So you need to have a very good understanding of the domain in which you are working. Especially because it's an interdisciplinary area, you have something, you lack something. That's how. And then when typically something is being developed, and typically in the corporate scenario, you outsource some problem, you don't have a direct access to the solutions. It's like something has been given to you as a out deliverable. So you don't know, there is no direct that what has been used to make the solutions or get to the solution, or who has done that. You don't have the direct talk with the data scientist to get your clarifications. So these are typical things that comes. And as a pharmacometrician, you probably deal with the different source related data coming from different sources, different data formats. You need to make them into standard format, or you need to work around with that. You need to deal with the missing values. You need to evolve your own data collection strategy, mapping that to standard procedures. Programming related efforts are also, like, there are some challenges in that. It's a cross-functional domain, as we know. You need to understand various aspects of it. You need to deal with the imputation of, because sometimes you don't have the data for a corresponding thing or a particular dosage, and then people are looking at you that you give me the quick results. So that's how. So I think with that, I thank you so much for your patient learning and making it more interactive. Thank you so much.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Subhash sir. Yeah, it was a wonderful session, very elaborate session. So I'll request participants at the end, if they want to raise any query or any doubts they have in their mind, so they can ask the questions. Participants, you can raise your hand, or else you can post your queries in the WhatsApp group. I think most of the queries you already have answered, Subhash sir, during our session. So we'll move towards the end.
If there are any further queries, please send them across to me over the email or maybe WhatsApp, anything for that matter. I'll be happy to help you out.
Yeah, sure, sir. Definitely, sir.
Thanks, Subhash, for a wonderful, informative session.
Thank you. My
Over
pleasure,
to
sir.
you, Sneha.
Thank you so much, sir. A million sincere thanks to you for sharing pharmacometric models, PBPK modeling, PK and PD modeling, and elaborating about data science, AI, and ML in detail. Once again, thank you so much, sir.
Thank you.